The battle outside was chaos. The sound of gunfire, the howls of the wolves, the clash of steel and the raw energy crackling from the mages. It all masked the quiet footsteps approaching the front entrance of the workshop. From the shadows at the side of the building, she emerged. Rose. Or at least, that's what everyone would see. She moved casually, effortlessly, as if she had no concerns in the world. Her stride was confident, controlled. No one challenged her. No one questioned her. Why would they? Rose belonged here. She reached the front entrance of the workshop, stepping inside without hesitation, the chaos of the battlefield fading behind her. Inside, the facility was dimly lit, the distant echoes of combat muffled by thick walls. And for the first time, she smiled. This was it, the moment she had waited for. Everything was going according to plan. Ravina moved through the workshop with ease, every step purposeful, every glance calculated. She knew exactly where she was going, and who she was looking for. The war room was quiet compared to the battlefield outside. Eli stood near the comms, monitoring the fight, her violet eyes sharp and calculating. Evelyn sat nearby, fingers twitching slightly, her energy coiled, ready for whatever came next. And in the center of it all, Argoz. She looked tense, anxious. She knew this fight was because of her. Ravina, still wearing Rose's face, stepped inside, exhaling like she had just been through hell. "We need to move." Argoz looked up, startled. "What?" Ravina. Rose kept her voice steady. "Gunnar sent me in to get you somewhere safer. This place isn't secure." Eli's brow furrowed slightly, eyes narrowing, but she said nothing. Evelyn glanced between them. "I thought this was the safest place." Ravina sighed, stepping closer. "Not anymore." She looked at Argoz, voice laced with just the right amount of urgency. "You saw what happened at the facility. We're under attack. If Ravina gets her hands on you..." She let the sentence hang, watching as Argoz swallowed hard. Eli tilted her head slightly. "Where exactly do you plan on taking her?" Ravina didn't hesitate. "Gunnar and I talked. There's a secured room underground. I'll take her there myself." Silence. Argoz looked uncertain but nodded slowly. Eli still wasn't convinced. Then the door opened again, and Rose walked in. The real Rose. The room went dead silent. Argoz froze. Eli's expression darkened. Evelyn's eyes darted between the two, realization dawning. And for the first time, Rose locked eyes with herself. The air was thick with tension. Then the real Rose smirked. "Well, this is new." Ravina, still wearing her face, smirked back. "I was just about to say the same thing." For a moment, the two Roses stood there mirroring each other. And, for once in her life, Rose had finally met someone who could keep up with her. The two Roses circled each other, identical in every way, down to the smirk, the stance, the flick of fire in their eyes. It was unsettling. Even Eli, with all her intelligence and observation skills, had lost track of who was who. Evelyn squinted. "This is a problem." Argoz, gripping the celestial gem tightly, looked between them, clearly panicked. "What the hell do we do?" The two Roses spoke at the same time. "Oh, that's easy." Then they both turned to each other and scowled. "Stop that!" "You stop that!" Eli exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. "This is going to give me a migraine." "You think you have a migraine?" One of the Roses scoffed. "Try standing in my boots and realizing I now have a cheap knockoff." The other Rose arched a brow. "Please, if anyone's the knockoff, it's you." "Oh, really? Then what's my favorite drink?" "Coffee, black, because we don't have time for frilly bullshit." The real Rose hesitated. The fake Rose smirked. "See? Even you're doubting yourself." The door swung open and Katrina stepped in. She took one look at the situation, then sighed heavily. "Great. There's two of you. My nightmare has officially come true." Both Roses pointed at each other. "She's the fake." Katrina, ever unimpressed, folded her arms. "Yeah, that's helpful." How about proving it? The roses grinned simultaneously, with pleasure. And then it became a game. Eli had seen enough. The two roses were too busy trying to outsnark each other to notice anything else. Katrina, arms still folded, watched with her usual dry amusement. You know, she mused, I always thought one of you was already too much. But this is just cruel. Both roses snorted at the same time, then glared at each other for doing so. I say we just start throwing punches, one of them suggested. Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you? The other taunted. Eli, ignoring their nonsense, leaned toward Argoz. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Go. Argoz blinked, confused. Eli's eyes didn't waver. Run to the portal. Get to Alfheim. Argoz's breathing hitched. But now. For once, Argoz didn't argue. She slipped backward, moving cautiously toward the door. The roses were too busy trying to verbally destroy each other to notice. Oh, please, if you were actually me, you'd already have a plan for this. I do have a plan. I'm stalling while the real Rose sneaks out the back. Eli smirked. Ironic. Because Argoz was already gone. The fake Rose grinned. Face it, you can't prove you're the real one. You can't even prove it to yourself. The real Rose smirked. Then she slowly raised her right wrist. The silver bracelet glinted in the dim light. The fake Rose's expression didn't change, but for the first time, she hesitated. The real Rose didn't. Wham! Her fist slammed straight into the imposter's face, full force. The fake Rose stumbled back, cursing. The real Rose shook out her fist. Hope you're ready, sweetheart. Then they lunged at each other. Darren and Caleb were still in the fight. The Wolfmobile rumbled forward, its tires kicking up dirt as Caleb scanned the battlefield from the turret. The numbers were dwindling, but the enemy was still putting up resistance. Then, Jules' voice crackled over the radio. Incoming, I'm en route. Cover me! Darren gritted his teeth, gripping the wheel. Copy that. Bulldog's got your back. Caleb swung the turret, searching. I don't see her yet. Then, movement. A dirt bike ripped through the battlefield, weaving between fallen enemies and debris. Jewel was coming in fast, too fast, and right behind her, more Black Dawn troopers. Caleb locked on. I got 'em! He opened fire. Tracer rounds lit up the battlefield, streaking toward the pursuing enemies. Darren pushed the Wolfmobile forward, giving Jewel a path to reach them. The fight wasn't over. But if Jewel was coming, that meant Lioness was still alive. And that meant they had a chance. The battlefield was still hot, but the tide was shifting. Jewel was closing in, Caleb laying down cover fire as Darren maneuvered the Wolfmobile. Then, the radio crackled. A new voice came through. Echo base. This is Hawk 1. We are 5 minutes out. 2 Hawks, fully stocked. Confirm status. Silence. No one answered. Darren rolled his eyes, shaking his head. Oh, sure. Now we get back up, and suddenly no one knows how to work a radio. He grabbed the mic, keying it in. Hawk 1, this is Bulldog. You're coming in loud and clear. We got a hell of a welcome party waiting for you, so I'd recommend bringing extra snacks. The radio was quiet for a second. Then, laughter from the other end. Copy that, Bulldog. Snacks and ass-kicking en route. Darren grinned. Caleb chimed in from the turret. Why the hell didn't anyone else answer? Darren shrugged. Guess they're too busy playing hero. Lucky for them, we know how to multitask. The radio crackled again. 4 minutes out. Hawk 1, out. Darren clicked the mic off and smirked. See? Was that so hard? Caleb snorted. You're impossible. Darren grinned. You love it. Ahead, Jewel was still weaving through the battlefield, and the fight wasn't over yet. They just had to hold out a little longer. Reinforcements were coming. The moment Jewel reached the Elizabeth, gunfire erupted from the tree line. Contact! Tree line! Caleb shouted, swinging the turret around. Darren gritted his teeth. Because of course they were waiting for us. Jewel ignored the chaos, immediately dropping to Elizabeth's side. The former director was pale, her breathing shallow. Jewel's eyes darted over the wound, her gut twisting. A direct hit. Right in the side. But the worst part? Her nervous system was shutting down. Same effect as Shade's wound, same damn rifle. Jewel knew the symptoms, knew the paralysis was temporary, but severe. Elizabeth tried to speak, but her words slurred. Her eyes flickered, her fingers barely twitching. "I got you," Jewel murmured, working fast. "Just hold on." The radio suddenly crackled. "Echo base, this is Hawk 1. Recommend all units take cover. We are 60 seconds out. I repeat, get under something solid." Darren grabbed the mic. "Hawk 1, this is Bulldog. You see the minigun fire? That's your problem area." Caleb, grinning like a lunatic, let the turret rip. Tracer rounds lit up the tree line, a blazing neon storm of destruction. Darren watched the rounds pour in, then keyed the mic again. "Light 'em up." The Black Hawks were almost here, and the bastards in the trees? They were about to have a really bad day. The moment Ravina dropped her disguise, Eli slammed her palm onto the console. Lockdown initiated. A series of metallic clanks echoed through the war room as the blast doors sealed shut, cutting off all exits. Ravina's eyes flicked to the doors, then back to Eli. Eli smirked. "Oops, looks like you're stuck." Ravina's lips curled into a slow, dark grin. "You think a little steel is going to stop me?" Rose cracked her knuckles. "No, that's our job." Katrina twirled her katana, the shadows around her curling like living things. "You locked yourself in a room with 4 pissed-off pack members." Evelyn rolled her shoulders, hands glowing with magic. "Bold move. Stupid, but bold." Ravina sighed, shaking her head. "You mortals and your arrogance." She lifted her hand, dark energy crackling around her fingers. Then she lashed out. A wave of black energy surged across the room. Evelyn met it head-on, throwing up a shimmering barrier that rippled violently under the force. Katrina moved fast, darting to the side, circling like a predator. Rose was already moving, fire licking at her fingertips. "You want a fight?" she grinned. "Let's make it fun." Ravina smirked. "Gladly." And with that, the war room became a battlefield. The war room erupted into chaos. Ravina moved like a spectre, her magic lashing out in waves of shadow and raw force. Evelyn threw up barriers, deflecting the worst of it, but it was taking its toll. Katrina darted in and out of the shadows, trying to find an opening. Rose was relentless, fire crackling at her fingertips as she hurled flames at Ravina, forcing her to stay on the move. For a moment, Ravina was holding her own. But then, Eli smirked. She pressed a final command on her console. "Magic dampeners, engaged." A deep hum vibrated through the room. The walls pulsed, runes flaring for a brief second, then every flicker of magic in the room died. The flames in Rose's hands, gone. The energy in Evelyn's fingertips, snuffed out. And Ravina stumbled. For the first time, her eyes widened. She tried to summon power, but there was nothing. Her magic was cut off. Katrina grinned. She cracked her neck, rolling her shoulders as she twirled her katana once before flipping it backward, choosing to fight the old-fashioned way. "Well, well," she said, stepping forward. "Looks like the playing field just got leveled." Ravina growled, shifting into a defensive stance. Rose smirked, flexing her fingers. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Don't like fair fights?" Evelyn rolled her shoulders. "This is about to be fun." Ravina exhaled sharply, bracing herself. This was no longer a battle of magic. This was about who could hit the hardest. And the pack, they knew how to brawl. The Super Trooper roared, muscles straining as it fought against Clora and Omega's relentless assault. It swung wildly, massive fists crashing into the ground, but they were too fast, a blur of movement attacking from every angle. Its enhanced body was tough, but even monsters had weaknesses, and Clora was finding them. She darted in, blade flashing, cutting into the tendons of its right leg. Omega lunged, sinking his teeth into its shoulder, using his weight to pull it down. The creature stumbled, nearly collapsing, but it wasn't done. With a guttural snarl, it twisted, grabbing Omega midair. Clora felt the pain through their bond. Her vision flashed red. Before the monster could slam Omega into the ground, Clora was already moving. She vaulted up onto its back, wrapping an arm around its thick neck, dagger pressing against its throat. "Drop him." Her voice was low, cold, and full of promise. The Super Trooper hesitated. Then it made its final mistake. Instead of letting go, it squeezed harder. Omega yelped in pain. Clora saw nothing but red. Her dagger drove deep into the creature's neck. It roared, thrashing, but Clora held firm. Gunner and Alpha moved in. Gunner fired Starbreaker point-blank into the monster's gut, the enchanted round detonating on impact. Alpha lunged, clamping his jaws around its arm, twisting with raw strength. A sickening crack. The Super Trooper collapsed. It was over. Clora didn't move. She could still feel its body twitching beneath her, feel Omega's fury running through her veins. Gunner stepped forward, his voice quiet. "Clora." Her breathing slowed. She let go. The Super Trooper was dead. And Clora and Omega had won. The battle was over, but Clora wasn't done. She could still feel it. The pulse of adrenaline, the fire in her veins, the hunger for more. Omega stood beside her, panting, his fur bristling, muscles twitching. But Clora, she couldn't move. Her breathing was ragged, her vision hazy. The blood rage had taken hold, a deep, primal instinct that surged through every fibre of her being. This was what it meant to merge. This was the cost. She wanted to fight, needed to fight. Her body was wound too tight, every nerve screaming for another kill. Omega let out a low, steadying growl. Alpha moved to his side, pressing close, grounding him, steadying him. They knew. They had felt this before. And Gunner, he knew it too. He stepped forward, voice calm, steady. "Clora." She didn't look up. Her fists were clenched, her entire frame shaking. "Breathe." She tried, but it wasn't enough. Her pulse was too fast, the merge still clinging to her, still demanding more. Omega whined softly, pressing against her. Clora blinked, finally looking down at him. She saw his exhaustion, felt it through their bond, not just his. Heron, and then her knees buckled. She collapsed, gasping for air. Omega pressed close, not letting her fall completely. Alpha let out a short, commanding bark, an instinctual call, a signal for support, for package. Then the doors to the workshop burst open. Aliana strode in, her armor gleaming, her violet eyes sharp as the elves surged in behind her. Reinforcements. The elves fanned out, securing the area, cutting down any stragglers. Aliana's gaze swept the battlefield. Then she saw Clora on the ground, Gunner standing over her, Alpha and Omega at her side. She took in the exhaustion, the tension still radiating from the pack. Then her eyes narrowed. She turned, looking toward the war room, the sealed doors. Why is the war room locked? The deep, thunderous roar of rotor blades split through the battlefield. 2 Black Hawks came in fast and low, the downdraft kicking up dust and debris. Before the enemy could react, the first bird opened fire. The miniguns spun up, unleashing a storm of lead into the tree line. The second bird followed, laying down a relentless barrage. The Black Dawn forces never stood a chance. Darren grinned, watching from the Wolfmobile. "Now that's what I call customer service." Caleb chimed in from the turret. "I'd leave a 5-star review." Darren keyed his radio. "Hawk 1, Bulldog. Beautiful work. Let me guess. Extra charge for premium delivery?" A chuckle came over the comms. "Oh, you bet your ass." The first bird peeled off, circling for another gun run. The second bird flared hard, touching down. The side doors slid open. A team of heavily armed agents poured out, moving like a well-oiled machine. Suppressive fire ripped through the battlefield as they took up positions. The second Black Hawk came in next, landing just long enough to deploy another squad. Then, both birds lifted off, banking hard. As they pulled away, they rained down one last gun run, wiping out any remaining resistance. Then, they were gone. Darren whistled. "Now that's an exit." Caleb grinned. "Think they do weddings?" Darren snorted. "Not unless you want your in-laws vaporized." The battle was ending, but inside the war room, it was just beginning. Clora blinked up at Gunnar, her body still heavy from exhaustion. Wow, that was all she could say. She gave a slow nod. Gunnar patted her shoulder once, then turned away, heading toward the war room. As he approached, the sound of the battle inside became impossible to ignore. Flesh hitting flesh, a crash, a snarl, a grunt of pain. A full-on brawl was happening behind that door. Alpha fell in beside him, ears perked, body tense. Eliana followed, eyes narrowed. Gunnar glanced at the control panel. The readout was clear. The magic dampeners were engaged. He exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. Eliana tilted her head. You going in? Gunnar considered it. Inside, Rose, Katrina, and Evelyn were locked in a brutal fight with Ravina. No magic, no spells, just fists, blades, and pure will. He could charge in, could end it now. But they had this, he could tell. Alpha huffed beside him, watching the door, waiting. Gunnar crossed his arms. Let's give it a minute. Inside the war room was wrecked. Chairs were overturned, screens cracked, and the massive table in the center had a fresh dent from where someone, probably Ravina, had been slammed into it. The fight had been brutal, fast, and relentless. But now it was slowing. Rose, panting, blood trickling from her split lip, wiped her chin and smirked. Hey, Eli, she huffed, shaking out her bruised knuckles. Eli, adjusting her glasses, still at her console, glanced up. Yeah? Rose rolled her sore shoulders, watching Ravina struggle to stay upright. You got any more of those magic dampening tricks? She held up her wrist, the silver bracelet still locked around it. Or was this one just made for little old me? Eli held up 2 identical bracelets, wiggling her fingers. Rose grinned. Oh, sweetheart, you just made my day. With that, she drove another brutal punch into Ravina's jaw. The sorceress stumbled, dazed. And that was the opening. Katrina moved first, swift as a shadow, slipping behind Ravina, locking her arms. Ravina snarled, trying to twist free, but she was already too slow, too worn down. Rose grabbed one wrist, Katrina grabbed the other. Eli was there in an instant, snapping the first dampener shut around Ravina's wrist. Katrina secured the second. A pulse of energy rippled outward. Ravina froze. She could feel it. Her power gone. Completely cut off. Evelyn, wiping blood from her temple, flicked a hand, picking up shackles from her kit and placing around Ravina's wrists, snapping together with a metallic clang. Rose, grinning, patted Ravina's shoulder. Tough break, honey. Katrina sighed, cracking her neck. Finally. Ravina slumped against her restraints, chest heaving, eyes burning with hatred. But she was beaten. Eli, smirking, keyed her mic. Gunnar, you're going to want to see this. Argoz walked numbly down the hall, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She had one goal, reach the portal, escape, leave this all behind. But then she stopped. Her breath hitched. This is all because of me. People were dying, fighting. And for what? A gem she never asked for? A power she didn't want? Her hands trembled. She couldn't keep running. Not when they were bleeding for her. Instead of heading to the portal, she turned. She pushed open the back exit, stepping into the cold air. And then she froze. A shadow loomed in front of her. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in black, Draven's captain. She recognized him instantly. Her blood turned to ice. Before she could react, he moved. A hand seized her throat, lifting her off her feet. She gasped, clawing at his wrist, her legs kicking in open air. His face was unreadable, cold, calculating. You should have run, little goblin. With a burst of strength, she twisted, breaking free. She stumbled back, but didn't run, didn't scream. Instead, she held up her hands. Stop it! Her voice wavered. Stop the fight. I'll go with you. The captain tilted his head, studying her. Then he smiled, a cruel, knowing grin. Good choice. He moved swiftly, snapping restraints around her wrists. The cold metal bit into her skin. She barely felt it. As he led her toward the tree line, she looked back. And she saw it. Gunnar and Clora. She watched them deliver the final blow to the Super Trooper. Watched as they won. And then a rift opened, a dark, swirling portal to God's new where. She stepped through and vanished. No one saw her leave. The battle had been too chaotic, the aftermath too consuming. The war room was still sealed, with Ravina trapped inside, fighting for her freedom against Rose, Evelyn, and Katrina. Outside, Gunnar was focused on Clara's state, watching as Omega nudged against her, grounding her in the aftermath of the merge. Aliana and the elven troops moved across the battlefield, securing what was left, cutting down any lingering threats. Darren and Caleb remained at the facility, assisting in the recovery efforts. Everything was still moving, still tense. No one noticed the back door standing slightly ajar. No one saw the small footprints leading away from the workshop. No one saw the rift open. By the time they realized something was wrong, it would already be too late. The tension inside the war room hadn't fully settled. Ravina was shackled, battered, but still defiant, her lips curled in silent fury. Rose, breathing hard, ran a hand through her sweat-dampened hair. Hell of a workout. Katrina leaned against the table, shaking out her bruised knuckles. Remind me not to fight witches in closed spaces again. Evelyn, still seething, kept her eyes locked on Ravina, ensuring there was no trick left to play. Then, Eli moved. She swiped across her console, disengaging the lockdown. A mechanical voice confirmed, lockdown lifted. All systems restored. Eli barely paid attention. Something had caught her eye. An alert, unauthorized exit detected. Her stomach plummeted. With a sharp breath, she pulled up the security feed. Her violet eyes widened in horror. The back door. She watched, helpless, as the video replayed. Argoz stepping out into the night. The shadowed figure waiting. The brutal grab. The moment Argoz broke free. Only to stop. Only to surrender. Eli's breath hitched as she watched the restraints snap onto Argoz's wrists. Then, the rift opened, and just like that, she was gone. Eli froze. The colour drained from her face. Then, she slammed the emergency beacon. Gunnar's voice crackled over the comms. Eli. She turned, locking eyes with Rose, Katrina, and Evelyn. We have a problem.